In the interest of time, I just want to make sure that we make the full use of this opportunity. My name is Ed Mabaya. I'm a research professor in global development. Good afternoon, everybody, and good day to those of us who are joining online. Today's special seminar is co-sponsored between the Tsujimoto Perspectives in Global Development and the A.D. White Professor at Large program. We're quite thankful, especially for the spread, the lunch that we have here. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Bram, who is the Director General of the International Institute, International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, known as CIMMYT. Bram leads one of the world's largest premier agri-food research institutions that's advancing science and innovation to strengthen the productivity, resilience, and so sustainability of maize, wheat, and other crop systems as well. Throughout his career, Bram has worked at the intersection of rigorous science and real-world impact, building partnerships that connect researchers, farmers, policymakers, the private sector to address food security, climate change, and rural livelihoods. His leadership reflects a systems perspective that many of us in this room care about deeply. Among his many accolades, Bram serves as A.D. White Professor at Large, and I know this is his last day here. We're so lucky to have him. He's also the recipient of the Norman Borlaug Field Award. I think the first time I met Bram about 10 years ago was when he was receiving this award. And he's also a fellow of the American Society of Agronomy. Many more accolades, but I think you'd rather hear from him and than me to go on and on this. But today's talk is entitled Tectonic Shifts in Agri-Food Research and Innovation for Development. What is next? I could not think of a better person to address this critical topic and share his remarks with us. And with that, please help me welcome Bram Govaerts.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for having me here. I guess being Ithaca, the first thing I need to talk about is the weather. So I'm very happy that I made it despite storms. But moreover, however cold it is outside there, I do want to highlight that when you come to Cornell, it's always warm because there's always a warm welcome. So thank you very much also for that. And we have great enthusiasm there in the back. Not sure what that is. Okay, it will eventually stop, no problem. So, of course, you could see the title, and I think you are not surprised about that title. I think we are looking today at immense shifts in the field of work where we are, and what those shifts mean. Some of you have participated in the seminar yesterday, and we took a more scientific science topic lens. You can look it up online. Today, I want to look more from a strategic perspective, what is really happening. When I re-looked at the title and it said, what's next? I must confess, I was like, I'm not sure I know what's next. So I guess we're going to have to construct and co-create that together. Having that said, this is also my last visit as A.D. White Professor. And there's a few ways you can look at how things evolve. And so this is my Cornell book. So I went back and I was wondering who's the first person that is in my Cornell book, which was actually in November 2018. And no surprise, it is Ronnie Kaufman. So Ronnie, I have written exactly down what you were expecting from me to do. Bring in reasonable resources was one of them. PhDs that can have a bonus by having international exposure. And I think we did do that. And of course, lectures, and we have one today. And then the second person in my book is Johannes. And so I also have our call from 2018 in November. It was a little bit more tactical, like what's the process of selection? What do you need? What are the expectations so you can win? And what does the position entail? So look, here we are, and thanks both for what you have done to keep me here. I will say right away, today we are here, so there's still a few pages, so we have more things to discuss. But also, if we look at tectonic shifts, I thought, let me go back and see where were we in 2019. And so 2019, you may not know what this is, but this is the first picture of a black hole. So science in 2019, that was the highlight, first picture of the black hole in space. 2020, this was the picture of the year in 2020, and that was the first victim of COVID in Wuhan, where of course the COVID crisis started in 2009, in 2020, sorry, 2020. Moving on to 2021, there was a shift, there was an election in this country, but at the same time, COVID was ravaging very, very hard throughout the world. This was also the moment where they needed a fool to lead CIMMYT on the ground, and that was me. And so where I stepped into the role to see what can we still do with COVID. I do remember that there were voices saying the world's going to end. So why do we even try to keep breeding for wheat if it's anyway going to end? But as you see, things are never that dramatic, and here we are. I think a more important shock, probably, at least for me, because it comes very close home, coming from Europe, was 2022. This is a Russian soldier and a Russian war artifact. And I think we all know that this is about the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I think that was a major shift globally or the second major shift the past 6 years. Interestingly, the picture of 2023, and of course you ask ChatGPT, what is the picture of the year? And you get very interesting selection. Is this picture? This is a picture of a drought area in Spain that has never been this dry for the past 100 years, and was devastating entire harvests, not only of grains, but also of fruits and olives. That's 2023. 2024, I think you recognize, most of you will recognize this picture, which was another step. It was the morning of one of the press members that was covering the Gaza war, and that was in 2024. Taking something close for me as a shift was 2025, where there was a change in USAID, or the Agency for Development. And I think that's a shift I had in my professional life to react to, but I also think it is a show of how things are shifting in our field of work. So that's the first show, 6 years AD White. What do you go through when you take the AD White professorship? If you really want to know what you go through when you take an AD White professorship, this is the picture when I started, and this is the picture a few weeks ago. So all the gray hair is not from the AD White professorship, I can promise you that. The AD White professorship was not only about lectures, PhD students, and bringing in some resources, it was also about having fun. And when we started, I would have never thought that I could combine two passions. I'm very passionate about art and specifically dance, and about science. And last time I was here, we actually could combine those two. So I don't know who of you was there, but you missed something. There are pictures that are censored and in the vault and can only be released 35 years from now. All joking aside, I think you can see how the world has evolved, how this has been an opportunity for all of us that have been involved in this program. So I do want to thank the AD White program for being such a, I think, one of the most kind of innovative programs to bring different voices to universities. So really thank you for doing that, and for the committee, and of course for all the organization. I don't know if Cindy is here. I think she's right there in the back. So thank you very much. So today I am the Director General of CIMMYT, which entitles me, as I said yesterday, to not knowing anything about anything, as I'm regularly reminded by the scientists that work at CIMMYT. But what is CIMMYT? CIMMYT is a global organization that officially, as CIMMYT, was born in 1966, but it was actually created in 1943. As the Office of Special Studies between the US, a bilateral agreement between the US and Mexico, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, with support also of the Ford Foundation. Why is this important? It was not only a space where research and innovation for food security could happen. It was also an incipient, before we even knew the term, diplomacy 1.5, 2.0 space, which means diplomacy by non-career diplomats. So by creating this space, you can have conversations above the conflict. And the man in the green square is, of course, the man that will become the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for saving 1 billion lives. And I don't know if you know, but he only had one PhD student, and that student is in the room, and it's of course Ronnie. So that is here with us. But I want to highlight there's a record of success, the Green Revolution. There is also a mandate that CIMMYT still has today, driving new sustainable level transformation. I think what the Green Revolution was, we may be describing it today around wheat, varieties, etc. It was much more than that. It was a diplomacy 1.5, 2.0 effort to basically resolve one of the devastating problems, which was people dying. And so it was not just about wheat. There was potato breeding going on, there was rice breeding going on, etc., etc. Today, we want to go back to that mandate with the focus on food security, but it's more around resilience, not just about producing more and more, and I will get back to that. And it does require a bold approach. And this is maybe for the students here, if you want to just take one message home, I would recommend you to be bold, not reckless. There's a difference between being bold and being reckless. So I recommend you to be bold, but not reckless. And the CIMMYT of today reaches back to those origins. But of course, agri-food systems are drastically not only evolving incrementally, they are basically shifting fundamentally. So I think you are at a turning point as students, and if that is not students here in the room, if that is not a wonderful moment to be in history, that you can accompany those tectonic shifts, because this is a moment of structural change that will require accompanying by science and innovation. So the question is no longer whether there needs to be a kind of transformation. It is rather which kind of transformation it will be, how will it be shaped, who will be shaping it, and will it actually deliver more for the global community. One of the elements is, of course, a warming planet. If you look at corn in Mexico and you take some of the original landrace varieties, that those varieties have been able, with human intervention, to adapt by over 100 years, 1 degree Celsius increase. Now, the coming years, there will be 1.5, 2.5 degrees increase. So we're going to have to accelerate what we do just to stay status quo. That is not talking about heat breakthrough points. The difference with heat is it's not that you get kind of sicker or the plant gets less effective as you increase the heat. There's a point where there's a break point. There's a point where the functionality breaks. And the functionality breaks actually faster on the pollen, because pollen is it's actually a very fragile, but a very key element of a plant. And that pollen is not equipped. It's basically a clot of DNA, right? To move from one to the other, that is not equipped to resist a lot of heat. So that's the weak point in that system. When I started in 2019 as A.D. White professor, the graphs that we could show was that hunger was consistently going down and was actually at the lowest level of recent history. Today, that's going back up, spurred by the COVID crisis, but also by many of the conflicts now out there. And we see that there is acute food insecurity today in more than 16 countries and territories. That's the acute part. And it will require structural changes by 2050 if we want to avoid this to be more. Last time I was here in 2023, I presented for all of you the CIMMYT strategy process. And one of the elements was the design of 4 potential future scenarios. And these are the 4 potential future scenarios that we presented. And frankly, when we did the strategy, we were all very enthusiastic. And in a way, we thought we're going to be in the step-up scenario. Luckily, we did say we need to test our scenario, our strategy, because it may be that we end up in other scenarios, 2-world scenario. And actually, if you read the 2-world scenario today, it predicted a war in the Ukraine, which wasn't even started back then. It predicted global conflicts, and it predicted that there would be a matter of different power blocks taking position in the world. So it seems we have shifted to that 2 worlds scenario. We may like it, we may not like it, but the sooner we accept it, there's no longer a one consensus direction in the world. Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, and multilateralism is no longer an agreed global consensus that that is the way to do business, and that is the final objective of where to go. There's also no longer a consensus that the ODA or the development cooperation investments are required investments. The ODA funding model is fundamentally broken and running out of steam. And if you ask me, it is not coming back. It's not a matter of just holding out and thinking it is going to come back. Something will come back, or something will be decided, or there's a direction we need to go, but going back to where we were is not going to happen. And that is a global problem. That is, I actually think it is in a way unfair to say this is a US. No, it's equally Europe. It's equally other countries going into the same direction. So I will now break the rule of 3, which means you are supposed, when you do these kind of things, tectonic shifts, to only give 3. But when I started, I ended up with 5. So bear with me, it's going to be 5, which is 3 plus 2 makes 5. So first big shift that I want to present is, I think we're shifting, and this is probably the most comfortable one, from productivity to an efficiency. We have driven the system strongly around efficiency. There's only a few ports in the world that are the points where trade happens for cereals globally. There's very few ports because we have done it driven by efficiency, not driven by resilience. Resilience means redundancy, which means you have access capacity for which you have to have the willingness to pay. But you are paying for something that can become a future cost. So it's under a risk management perspective. So I think for decades, we have been driving more around agri-food system research and innovation that was prioritizing productivity, and it was very successful. The Green Revolution reduced famine risks, so there was an element of resilience in there, but I think the resilience matters more today than just maximizing yield. That doesn't mean productivity is an ugly word. We're not going to have resilience with low productivity levels. It means we need to accept redundancies to do the risk management. So what does that mean? We probably need to look at climate resilient crop varieties. We need to diversify our farming systems. We need to look at soil health restoration, integrated water management, but also an important element of equipping the entire value chain with risk management capabilities. Decisions for farmers, but also decisions for consumers to minimize or to manage risks. One of the examples is, and I don't think Maricelis and the Cornell team is here, but one of the examples is the collaboration that we have had with the team on UG99, disease surveillance, early warning, being able that there is response capacity. Today, if there is a new UG99, what was UG99 in 99 in Uganda? New rust disease. Scientists are not very creative, so 99, Uganda, UG99. And so that UG99 could have been COVID for wheat, wasn't it? Because there was an international effort to basically unlock the capabilities, and there was a huge effort around making wheat varieties resistant to that UG99. If we today would have a UG 27, that would not be that easily possible because we could call USAID, FCDO, and say we need emergency money plugged into this effort in order to deploy. Those resources are gone. On the one. On the other hand, CIMMYT's capacity to respond has reduced. On the other hand, if it weren't for a recent announcement, and I will get back to that, the surveillance system is under pressure. It's no longer measuring or set up or funded where it was in the past years. So our capacity to pick something up, our capacity to respond, and our capacity to unlock resources, all of that is undermined. So we're actually going into the opposite direction of resilience than the one we probably should be going, because this demands international collaboration, and we are precisely in a geopolitical fragmentation at this point. Second shift from linear innovations to more systems innovation. So the systems perspective versus probably what we knew as a linear deployment of research and innovation, from the lab to extension in the field, and then farmers who create value for the market. Today, our research has to be embedded in a more systemic view. What are the pressure points? How do I respond to those pressure points? Can my research be generated in a systems approach and not just a linear approach? And I think that dancing that you saw a couple of slides ago, that's what that is about. It is about confronting your research in an ecosystem that has different thinking, different perspective, but maybe also passing it through a different part of your brain by thinking about it in a different way. This means students, you need to have T-shaped skills. What are T-shaped skills? It means you need to be very, very deeply, that's your leg of your T, specialized in one of the efforts you're doing. If you want to do an MSc, PhD, yeah, you're focusing on a topic, but you also need a little roof. If you just are an I, which means a leg with a dot, you're not going to make it. You at least need to be a T. And what is the roof of the T? That's your skill set to connect with others, to integrate in the system, to put that deep knowledge into a broader context and rethink it from the needs that are out there back to your research today. You can also not just be a hyphen, yeah? If you're only connecting, then you're also not going to make it in this space. You need to specialize so you can show results. It's a T, a nice roof, nice leg. Depending on who you are, you can draw your T differently. You can be a bit of a longer leg, or you can have a bit of broader roof, but you need to be at least a T. So basically, it is connecting our production system towards nutritious outcomes. It is integrating biodiversity from the get-go into the farming capacity landscape. It's looking at post-harvest functionality and transformation. It's strengthening those value chains, and it's assuring that you have those feedback loops. It's also around what opportunities for jobs are we creating. The big question in Africa will be, how do we give jobs to all those young Africans that are upcoming, and what is the best pathway to do so? And can we design deliberately for those jobs? So you have the space, you have the person with the skill set to step into the space, and you have the empowerment and capabilities of the person that has the skill sets to step in that job space. So this graph looks linear, but actually that's because it's very difficult on PowerPoint to put it more complex. But it starts from the biodiversity, it ends with the consumer, it puts the value chain in the middle. But I think you can appreciate that there's many feedback loops to look at. And if you true and true look at the system, it becomes way more complex than that. Don't get lost in complexity. Even systems still have linear connections, yeah? So if you want to think linearly, it's fine. Just multiply it in your head multiple times and you will get there. Third shift, from public sector dominance to a blended ecosystem. Today, if we want to have impact, but also if you want to accelerate the research, it's not going to happen by asking the faculty at Cornell to go 10 to 20 times faster. or ask the scientists of CIMMYT to breed 10 to 20 times faster. That's not going to work. We're going to have to put parallel tracks, different ways of working into place. That includes deliberate involvement of private sector, agri-tech startups, biotechnology firms, digital platforms. It also means there may be innovations that are not going to make it in an academic environment, that you deliberately pick up and move into a private sector startup space. Now, the question is who picks those innovations before they die, and how do you pick them up and move them into that space? Requires a different skill set, and not everybody can have that skill set, so you need to do a deliberate design for it. Also, the rules of that private blended space are very different than the rules of the public space that we're used to. So we're going to have to create an interface that can make that work. So especially if you look at precision ag, I know Cornell is way ahead on the AI-driven advisory and the AI thinking. So how can we plug that into some of the private sector while we work on an international public goods space? I think given the blended space, the rules around what is international public good, what is pre-competitive space will be even more important. And if there's one thing I remind from very complex negotiations the past months, it is a statement that was made that CIMMYT needs to shift from just saying my rule is I'm an international public good to being able to enforce the rule I'm an international public good. So it's not no longer just by saying these are the rules by which we're playing. We're probably going to have to have the capability to make sure everybody is playing by those rules. And that's going to make things complex. A simple example, it's not just by me saying this machinery innovation is an international public good. If there is a strong company with good lawyers coming, they take the innovation, they patent the innovation, and they lock it away, there I am with my international public good. It means I need to have the capability to play and be able to patent it to make it available. That's a simple example. But look at databases. Look at cybersecurity. Look at what will that all mean. Probably our gene bank, 28,500 different maize accessions and 124,000 different wheat accessions, big bunker in Mexico, copy in Fort Collins, black box, cannot use, another copy black box in Norway, in Svalbard. We use that gene bank, that's the basis. That was the big biodiversity. Yeah, that was the resource to protect for humanity. It still is today, but probably the database that sits on top of that gene bank that is doing the genotypic and phenotypic connection for all those accessions is equally valuable. It's very clear that the biodiversity is an international public good. It's of humanity and CIMMYT is just taking care of it. What is the framework for those data is not clear. Today it's a bit of first come, first serve. And I think we urgently need a governance system where we agree that data around food need to be an international public good, and we need an international system that safeguards it, but also makes sure the right data is there, the access to the data is there, it is a fair way of accessing and using it. So something to think about and see who can play a leader role there. It's about open access science, long-term breeding programs, focus on essential crops and neglected regions, and supporting genetic resources in all its aspects, as I mentioned. Fourth shift, from north-south paradigm to a distributed leadership. I do think we need to recognize that there was a model where we were working more from the north to the south. Today, that model is gone. There's great innovations in the south that needs to move to the north. The capabilities of the Indian Research Institute is on some aspects probably 10 times higher than the Cornell capability on that aspect. Because they have more scientists, they have more resources, they have more, etc. So I think we're shifting from goodwill-driven aid to clear value propositions of shared spaces, and the middle powers, however you may describe that in science, are of course stepping up into this space. But I do think, although it's becoming more about return on investment, about having those global networks, about making sure that reach goes from reaching female farmers or women farmers to benefiting them, to empowering them, to actually making the transformation of the ecosystem so that they are embedded in a fair and equitable way. All those elements need to play, and that's where the tension between return on investment through a value proposition and an international public good has to come together in the same space. So I think regional breeding hubs are ever more important. Localized adaptation is important, but lifting it up to a global understanding. When I was here in 2019, there were no discussions about can CIMMYT work with professors that are doing education and extension. Today, that's actually a very interesting proposition. Are there things CIMMYT is doing that can be plugged in the extension space here in New York State? And are there things from New York State that can come back to CIMMYT to serve the global south? So that whole mental model has to change. And I do think it creates huge opportunities for a different way of considering and thinking and moving forward our science. It does require decentralized data platforms that are anchored in those clear rules of the game. But unfortunately, we are requiring for that distributed leadership would strengthen global solidarity. Because if we want to do that, we need to allow to have the leadership to be distributed and the generosity between that leadership in order to work together. That seems not to be the direction we are going into. So my fifth shift, more than a shift, is probably a kind of paradox, yeah? We seem to be saying we need to be more interdependent. We need to shift and transform the rules of the game. Previous rules are not gonna come back. ODA is not gonna come back north to south. We need to design the element, but at the same time, we seem to be trapped in a two worlds scenario or a fragmented world. So with CIMMYT, we're equally struggling with that. Luckily, we did stress test our 2030 strategy under this scenario. But rest assured, stress testing your strategy under a scenario that you are looking at because it may be happening, but you don't want it to happen, is very different than telling your staff it's now happening. So we need to action upon what we stress tested while we are all hoping and maybe managing by that hope. So luckily, it was stress tested. So I invite you to look at that. How are we responding? I think the strategy responded to an emerging thought leader group, not the science powers that be, so to say, but the upcoming thought leaders had a lot to do with looking at what does success look like. So we did describe the ideal world for 2030 for CIMMYT, and we did that again the past months. I cannot yet disclose it here. It's still a process that is ongoing. But so we're thinking, what is the ideal setup and how can we work backwards from that? And this conversation this week is an important input for that process. What is the role of what I'm calling a U5 or a U6? The 5-6 universities that can come together and support international agricultural research to respond to those tectonic shifts. Where can we deliver value? Yes, we had to let 20% of our capabilities go at the end of 2025. Under a future-proofing exercise, what is high quality and future-proof? What is low quality and not future-proof? The low quality, not future-proof, unfortunately, we have to let go. The future-proof, not high quality, we need to work hard to make it high quality. And not future-proof, but it is high quality, we want to repurpose so it becomes high quality and future-proof. What is high quality and future-proof? We are investing more. We had to work on the three scenarios: a hibernation, rich and poor, and back on track to lead. We started 2026 with a budget that was hibernation. Basically, everything is kind of kept in a status, so it's the minimum deterioration possible. Today, and we'll come back to that, thanks to an investment, we're moving into rich and poor, but that is one of the most difficult managerial challenges. Because my scientists are sitting at the table and there's a glass wall between the table And the left side of the table has a nice 5-star meal because they have sufficient resources. The other side of the table has a very poor meal and they're watching each other through the mirror, but you cannot go and take the food. You cannot even share the food because the resources are not flexible. In this tectonic shifted world, the resources come very concentrated on various particular investments, Western Hemisphere, Africa, maize. You cannot use it for agronomy. You can only use it for seeds. So it's all way more fragmented than it was before. We're working on 3 important pillars: discovery, system dev, and ink. Discovery is a traditional seeds agronomy. System dev are the big programs where we work with hundreds of thousands of farmers, the Massagro type interventions, and I presented Massagro in one of my other AD-wide visits. And the new what we call ink, and it means it's not a real ink. It's a pillar thinking about how do we make that interface with the private sector. How do we valorize some of our capabilities that are otherwise a cost factor, but also how do we take some elements into startups? What in the organization is inkable that was being lost before as a potential impact stream to what we're trying to achieve, which is food and security. So those 3 pillars need to work together and ideally also become part of a new business model where the ink side also reinvests its resources from the private sector into the exercise. So today, we still generate a lot of impact, 18 million farmers every year, huge return on investment. For every $1 in wheat research, 70 to 200, in maize research, 20, or corn research, 20 to 35. We operate in 80 countries, headquarters in Mexico, but operations in 80 countries and 17 country offices, going from Nepal all the way to global disease early warning systems focused on Africa, Nepal, Pakistan for rust, but also rust phenotyping platforms in Njoro. So a really globally connected effort. It's not only about seed, it's also about integrated sustainable agricultural systems. So you know that the top picture there, left side, right side, same seed, same practice, the only same fertilizer. The only difference is the left side is conservation agriculture, the right side is traditional or more over conventional practices. Today, we know it's not only about yield, it's also about nutrition. So we have a strategic agreement or alliance with World Veg to be able to look at vegetables as a rotation crop. That doesn't mean we're going to do breeding for veg. It just means that in the design, we work with the World Vegetable Center to make sure to see how this can be designed in. Equally, I have a strategic agreement with ILRI and with IFPRI, the policy side, but also looking at the livestock side. So what's next? And this is probably the most frustrating slide for you because there are not real answers. It's the best I could come up with. 5 priorities: protect global public goods and understand what they are and how to do that. Scale drought and heat resistant nature positive agricultural practices. Embed equity at the core of innovations, not an afterthought, and not just as how do I deploy the innovation, but from the how do I design the innovation and the research. Govern digital transformation responsibly and reimagine multilateralism for agility. And those that were in the presentation yesterday know about that last point. Nice to say, everything fits on the PowerPoint, that's not the problem. How to make it realistic or how to actually deploy it is the question. My biggest concern is to reimagine multilateralism, to reimagine the way we work. I don't know where the table is. Where do we come together? Who's going to set the table? Where is the table to even start the conversation around this challenge? Many of the existing tables no longer have the credibility in order to even start the conversation or in order to even have people coming to the table. Many of the tables are in such a way that only half of those that should be sitting there are actually coming to the table. Having that said, I do see some turning points, so some new positive news, and one of it is last week. We had the renewed partnership with the American people. This is going back to the CIMMYT but rather to the Office of Special Studies. This agreement with the US government is signed under the Mexico-US 1943 treatment in a diplomacy 1.5, 2.0 space, recognizing the importance of having our headquarters at Mexico and recognizing the importance that all innovations, and this is a condition in the grant, have to be available for all countries without excluding any. This doesn't save us, but this gives us resources to kind of get through 2026. It's one of those things when the resources arrive, you already have spent quite some of them because you were maintaining the base capabilities. I do also see a turning point where we're going from fractures back to foundational. And so I do think the realization that new technology or new innovations is not about technology and innovations alone. The future of agri-food systems are broader than that. We need to look at governance. We need to look at the strength of institutions and partnerships. And I think these kind of considerations is one why I'm here. And I can see how we can spur a sort of a conversation. What does that U5, U6 means? What's Cornell's role there? But also this has forced us to do those strategic alliances with other organizations to rethink what are our different capabilities to put forward. Last but not least, very interesting conversations within the security space and a realization that food and security is an important investment to do, because the best war to win is the one that has never started. Because the success of the war is that you win with least casualties. So if you never start, you won in the first place and you have 0 casualties. So the best war is the one you never need to start. So how do we take away the fragility elements in the system, even to come to conflict? But then within conflict, that country that has the best resilience, that has thought through how to feed its population, has probably the strongest response capacity to any conflict that may break out. Last but not least, a challenge, did it also yesterday. I feel we as scientists are too much resolving yesterday's problem today. I hope we can move to a world where we look at how the world should look like and resolve tomorrow's problems today. With that, thank you very much and open for questions.
Thank you very much for that talk. We're going to take questions. If you can introduce yourself and make your question as brief as possible so we can accommodate as many as we can. And for those who are joining online, you can type in your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to you as well. There's one question over there.
Hi, thank you. My name is Bethany. I'm a sophomore in global development. My question is actually something we were just touching on, but I was wondering, with the current way that we've seen our government respond to ag research and to the way that they are extending their influence to those that they monetarily support, what safeguards does CIMMYT have in place to ensure that they are able to prevent undue influence from donors and key players that kind of unscrupulous motivations?
Yeah. So first, you need to have your own identity and red lines very, very clear. And for us, those red lines are international public good. Everything needs to be available for everyone. And this is a diplomacy 1.5, 2.0 space. So that means whatever conflict may be ongoing, when we talk about food and security in this space, we need to be able to bring those conversations together. Concretely, we have BISA, the Borlaug Institute for South Asia. Even at the height of the recent conflict between Pakistan and India, Pakistani and Indian scientists could come together and discuss wheat and have discussions around the latest innovations around that. Don't think that in the past, investments into our institutions did not come with an agenda. They've always come with an agenda. From the private sector, from the philanthropies, from the countries. Today, they also come with an agenda, and they come with conditions and clarity. There is somewhat a refreshing element to transactionality. It is more a transactional world. It does put very clear forward what one wants and what the other one wants, and you see if you can get come to an agreement. You also need them to be very clear and say, this is a red line. Sometimes no is a full sentence. And you need to be clear when you say today, this one, no is a full sentence. And the clarity of those negotiations is extremely important. That may mean that you take 9 months, 1 year to get through the point where you need to go. That also means you need to be ready to take a cost for what for you is a red line. And for CIMMYT, that cost was 20% of the staff, because it took longer to do the negotiations with multiple donors to get back to a space where we were comfortable. And not only with the agreement that I'm showing here, with multiple donors, it is about maintaining that 1.5, 2.0 space and that international public goods space and the sovereignty of the decisions of the institution.
Okay. Next question, Benga.
Thank you so much. My name is Benga. I'm in the Master's Program in Global Development. So innovation in agri has not been without major criticisms, especially around the socio-ecological impacts of some of these innovations. So I'm wondering, how have you, like at CIMMYT, for example, learned from some of these main critics, and how are you encouraging your scientists to take a step back sometimes to consider the broader implications of their innovations? For example, you want to increase the productivity of maize by 10 times. How are you encouraging scientists to take a step back and consider the broader socio-ecological implications before diving deep into those innovations?
It's an excellent question. And of course, everyone who has history to deal with and understand, right? So I think when we did the strategic planning, we did have a session around the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Green Revolution. And it was very refreshing to say, let's just put it all on the table. And there are elements that could have been done differently, but it's always also easy to put those elements on the table 20 to 30 years later, right? So rest assured, whatever we're going to decide here today, 20, 30 years from now, somebody's going to say you made a stupid mistake. But we did the best we could with the data that was available at the moment. I do think we have a challenge, one, to take unintended consequences, power relations better into account from the design. So that is where a capability around understanding that innovations are not neutral. They do further a certain agenda. They come with a worldview. We all come with a worldview inherently. So we need to confront those. But then also very fast feedback loops. I think the big advantage we have today is we have a capability to analyze and project and look at things and run them through scenarios that goes beyond the capacity of one brain. No? So if we use well a simulation capacity, I think many of the unintended consequences can actually be stress tested even before you start. But you need to take the time to do that design thinking and take those elements into account. There is never a no-cost intervention. No? Just by you walking on the street, that you're changing the reality. So there's also an element that there is never going to be anything we do that doesn't somewhat changes the reality. It's a question, what are we willing to look at? How do we compensate, and how do we make it maximize the win-win outcome of it?
Next question here.
Yeah, hi, Doctor. Thank you for your talk. I am Ben. I research food systems and emerging food system solutions. I was really excited by your strategic thinking about where we're going in food systems. And I'm still wondering more, when you mention emerging thought leaders, who are those thought leaders that you've identified?
Yeah, so within CIMMYT, we have identified a cohort of emerging thought leaders, and it's those that come up with new ideas. It's those that are willing to put their time at work for some of the new thinking. So those that are willing to take a little bit of a cost for putting their ideas forward, because when you put yourself out there, you're opening yourself for criticism and for people that say, no, I don't agree with you, right? So if you're asking me globally, who are those emerging thought leaders in a global stage? I don't know. I really don't know, but I think it is one of our challenges. Who's the next group of emerging thought leaders? Who's the next group of leaders in general that can champion this? And that's probably the group that could create a table around which we can sit and have those new conversations. who they are, I don't think we maybe you, Ben, I don't know.
Good. Mariah, are there any questions from online? Okay, then we go to, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was at
Questions on
your
this
talk
paper.
yesterday and this one today. Thank you so much. It was what you said about the North-South relationship that caught me. And we know that it's been kind of like South has to depend on whatever the North says and what the North does. So I'm trying to imagine, as you talk about reimagining, how are you going to change these dynamics of the South having to depend on what the West says and how the West moves for their own food security?
Yeah. Once again, you're going to be very disappointed, but I don't have all the answers to that question. But one of the elements for sure is, for example, we were using ODA resources, so development cooperation resources, to do wheat breeding. But that wheat breeding has an impact globally. That's actually a global conversation. We were not talking a lot about that global conversation. We were not talking about the impact for American farmers on our wheat breeding activities. That 60% roughly can be traced back to collaborative research with CIMMYT. I'm not saying CIMMYT is doing it all on its own, but same in Europe. Europe had no idea that was part of a global ecosystem that was working together, was highly interrelated. So just by making some of those things already visible is an element. But I also think the business model or the investment model per se for food security has to change and has to inherently have those elements in there. That also means there's going to have to be decisions at tables of decision makers to invest in your own food security, and a consciousness that if we start hunkering down of individual country and maximizing the food security of your own country at the cost of other countries, that is a no sum game. In the end, it's going to end up in a no sum game.
No, we're close to our time. If you have to leave as a student, yeah, feel free to just do so as quietly as you can. But we have one more question from this end. Anybody? Okay, this one.
Thank you so much. I was wondering whether I can spend another word after 7 years of being an ADY professor. How do you see education and workforce development and opportunities with collaboration with the university here looking forward?
Yeah, first an observation, and it's a dangerous one, so don't shoot me. But just a personal observation, in my conversations this time, I feel a more closed environment that is more looking at trying to go back open, but the conversations feel very different than when I was here the first time. I think there was a more open, more let's go out there in conversation. But students, sorry for the students that are sitting here, were always sparkling with new ideas and let me take a bit of risk. And you were like, at least I was like, whoa, if I could have the courage to take that kind of risk. There's a lot of fear sitting in many of the conversations today. And so moving forward, we need to take that fear out of the conversation. That's number one. Number two, we're going to have to design a new collaborative space. Some of the emerging thought leaders need to find a home in that space in order to be able to drive boldly, not reckless, and by inspiration, not by fear. And it feels we need to get the fear out of the conversation.
And Bram, now most of the students are out. This is mostly faculty. I can't help but ask, one of the tectonic shifts that I feel coming around the curve is AI.
Right.
How does it enter this equation? Because for people of my age, it looks like it can be.
Yeah, I think Cornell is really at the forefront of thinking what AI can do.
Yeah.
What I'm a bit jealous about that. So if there's any collaboration stream with CIMMYT, definitely AI is one, how to use, but it's not AI for AI, right? It's how to use data, how to make sure that data can be turned into decision-making. Mm-hmm. That's where I see AI play a very big role. But also this forward-looking kind of approach where you can design things in a non-existing space and you can look at trade-offs. I mean, it would be wonderful that a minister of ag can actually run a policy through such a space and say, okay, this is actually working or this is not working. And just to give one example, but it also means we need to make our data and information actionable, not so much for the AI tool, but for what we want the AI tool to be able to do with it and then make it actionable within AI as a tool. So there's a whole part there that we need to get right. For CIMMYT, that's a challenge. I mean, we have huge databases. They are not at the point where they are as ready as they should be for such an AI enterprise. I also think we need to make sure that we have the data from everywhere for AI. And yesterday I gave an example of how AI can be skewed based on the data you feed in, right? So be very careful with that. And that goes back to the governance. The governance is not only about governing the data you already have. There should be an element of decision-making around where does the investment go to generate additional data.
Yeah. So Bram, I want to thank you for 3 key things. 1, for this excellent talk. 2, for your engagement through the ADY Professor at Lunch. I know that it's kind of coming to a close, but most importantly, for your leadership in this space. CIMMYT and the great work that people are doing, your team and other people out there, the great work that you're doing, contributing to this particular space. Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Much appreciated.
Please hang around and join us.
There's more food, yes, and please don't run away.
Thanks so much.